Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, you're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else, not on the media, and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Welcome to another edition of Illinois Rising. I'm Dan Proft, co-host of Chicago's Morning Answer, 5 to 9 a.m. weekdays with Amy Jacobson on AM 560. And with me on this edition is Brian Timpone, the founder of Local Labs, content production company. Brian, this story that papers that we collaborate on have been reporting for the last couple of weeks of the fight for, I guess, leadership of the Illinois Republican Party in a sense. But I'm not just talking about the state party chairman. I'm also talking about members of the state central committee. There is one seat on the what essentially serves as the executive board of the Illinois Republican Party that is still in dispute, so much in dispute that it's now in litigation. It's Southern Illinois. Bob Winchester, who has long represented most of Southern Illinois on the state central committee of the Republican Party, filed suit downstate last week claiming that essentially the party poobahs manipulated the election results to seat their preferred candidate. I'm talking about Ronner and Schneider and Durkin and Brady to seat State Senator Chapin Rose over Bob Winchester, even though if you run the numbers as they were tabulated fairly, Winchester won. And so you have yet another controversy of not just Illinois being not broken but fixed, but the Illinois Republican Party being not broken but fixed. And you've been doing some of the reporting on this yourself.
Right. So it's actually a fascinating story because it shows you how the sausage is made. And when people try to be thuggish, historically, this type of thing would happen, swept under the rug. No one would ever hear about it. No media would pick it up. No media would even pick up this lawsuit. But it's different today, and we get to see exactly how this works. And in this case, if you believe the affidavits, this was a rigged election.
And why they manipulated, they being Schneider and his allies, why they manipulated this election was because Schneider was facing a challenge for state party chairman by Mark Shaw from Lake County. And so the election, Shaw versus Schneider, was going to turn on Winchester versus Chapin Rose for this seat on the board, because the board then elects the chairman by weighted vote. And then Shaw capitulated, cut a deal, sold his soul for a title, which happens all the time in the Republican Party, and wanted Winchester to get out too, take a deal. Winchester didn't want to take a deal, so now you got a complication. You got Shaw pretending to be some unity figure. He's going to manage the grassroots. Well, he's completely delegitimized himself by selling his soul to Ron or Schneider. But you have Winchester saying, the hell with them. I want my seat back that I won fair and square, and you took away from me because you were trying to protect Tim Schneider, who was facing an existential threat before they bought off Mark Shaw. It's a little complicated, but again, this deal-making in this city and this state, not that complicated for our listeners, people familiar with these sorts of exchanges of even titles, much less money, for somebody's integrity. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Steve Bolton, who is the attorney representing Bob Winchester in this litigation. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan.
So give us a status on the Winchester complaint that's kicking around the courts, where it is, and what the prospects of success are.
Well, the complaint was originally filed in Hardin County, Illinois, down by the Ohio River in southern Illinois, in state court, asking for an injunction and a declaratory judgment that Bob Winchester was the state central committeeman based upon the election. In filing that, we had collected affidavits from a number of people in various precinct committeeman elections across the entire congressional district, one of which in key was Madison County, in which the affiant stated that there was a unanimous vote for Bob Winchester, passed quite lawfully, but it was not counted as such by the county chairman when he turned in the results. And if Madigan County flips to a unanimous vote, Bob Winchester will win it right then and there. So that's one of the main things that we're pursuing. Once we filed in the state court in Hardin County, the Republican Party has now filed a petition for removal, as it's called, to bring the case to federal court in Southern Illinois in Benton, and the case will likely proceed there for the time being, based upon the initial fencing over the pleadings between us and the Republican Party. And as well, we have joined the members of the State Central Committee, as well as the Illinois State Board of Elections, which certified the result, which really was nothing more than adding up the numbers. They didn't pass upon whether there were shenanigans or not.
Steve, it's Brian Timpone. Question: has there ever been a lawsuit like this before, from your research or experience, where there's an obvious, obviously rigged election, or there's what was turned in was not what was reported, and there was a challenge? Has this ever gone to Illinois court before, from your reading of it?
Not quite like this, where first of all, it's an internal party election. It's a unique system in that the county chairmen, for example, are supposed to turn in the results of their county elections directly to the Illinois State Board of Elections. In this case, it didn't do that. It didn't happen. What they did was they turned in their results to the Illinois Republican Party, which is suspicious just to begin with. Then the Illinois Republican Party turned it over to the State Board of Elections for the mathematical counting up of the votes. So this is a very unusual circumstance, which is beyond your normal election ballot fight, which occurs from time to time, especially here in Chicago.
Yeah, so this, though, you suggested that this case is going to be removed to federal court in Southern Illinois. So if elections, much less party affairs, are largely state and local issues, then how is this adjudicated in federal court?
Well, that's because Bob Winchester's, one of his claims, has stated that the actions of the state party violated his constitutional rights in regard to a free and fair election.
Mm-hmm.
By being the person who counted the votes for the State Board of the entity that counted the votes for the State Board of Election, the Illinois Republican Party has now stood in the shoes of the state, which means that the constitutional claim by deprivation by the state is now plainly stated against the Illinois Republican Party.
Now, there were rumors that the Illinois Republican Party's counsel, John Fogarty, was asked about the lawsuit by the seated members of the State Central Committee at present, and he said in executive session, this is, just coming out of the rumor mill, but said in executive session, hey, this is nothing to worry about, we got this. Why would Fogarty be suggesting that this is a wave off and there's nothing to worry about in terms of overturning the seating of Chapin Rose in favor of Bob Winchester?
Well, first of all, that came to me directly from one of the persons sitting in the meeting.
Oh,
Second
okay.
of all, I think that they're simply trying to put the members of the State Central Committee at ease because from my hearing of it, they expressed concern over this lawsuit and its ramifications for the November election and other things like that. It seems to me that it is in the interest of the Republican Party to try and sweep this under the rug because of the potential impact upon the Rauner campaign for its own actions, it seems to me. However, I'm at a loss right now to understand exactly what it is that the Republican Party is leaning on. Mr. Fogarty has brought up a trial court order from the Circuit Court in Chicago, which has very little weight at all, and it asserted a principle of law that is simply wrong on the precedents of Illinois and the federal courts. So and also when I say we have affidavits in Madison County, we have an affidavit from the county chairman that was the head of the meeting. We have an affidavit from the secretary of the meeting, and we have an affidavit from the very person who made the motion for unanimous vote, saw it seconded, and noted that there was no objection made by anyone. So it's a little difficult to know where the Republican Party truly is going to go with this.
Well, and there's also, Brian, there's been reporting that we've done in some of our outlets downstate where members, precinct committeemen from other counties like Fayette County have also said, I didn't, the way this went down in my county, it's not just Madison, the way this went down in my county was wrong. It looked like it was wired. It wasn't fair. It was not something that was the way it should be.
Well, clearly there was a pattern in multiple counties where the issues were being pressed against Mr. Winchester and in favor of Mr. Rose. You mentioned of Fayette County, the precinct committeeman who was our primary source on this stated in an affidavit his belief that it was simply railroaded. The entire election went down in about 45 seconds or maybe less. And furthermore, in the minutes of that meeting, indicate there wasn't even a vote in favor of Chapin Rose. They simply excluded Mr. Winchester and then simply treated it as a unanimous vote for Mr. Rose without even taking the vote, thereby not giving any precinct committeeman a chance even to not vote for Chapin Rose by leaving himself present and abstaining. So
Steve,
it's a very peculiar incident.
So, Steve, what happens when you win? Does that mean that there's going to be another vote completely? Does it mean Winchester wins? Because it sounds like there were irregularities all over the place in this regard.
Well, the legal effect, first of all, is that Bob Winchester will be declared the 15th District State Central Committeeman. That brings up an interesting question as to the election that recently occurred last weekend in which Chairman Schneider was reelected to the position. It rebalances the weighted vote, as it's called, in that the 15th District is the single largest weighted vote in the entire state. So when that district flips over to potentially a new candidate, that affects the outcome of any potential future election. Additionally, there is the prospect of a court action against Chairman Schneider in what's a legal term called quo warranto, when meaning by what right, to challenge that election and say there has to be a new election because the wrong person was voting, or at least participating, for the 15th District. Things could be very different the second time around.
It's just like in Hoosiers. You re-vote on whether or not Coach Norman Dale stays or he goes. I like it. He is Steve Bolton. He's an attorney representing Bob Winchester in this case against, the Illinois Republican Party for rigging the election of the party leadership. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dan. Have a good day.